Hello, my name is Richard Haight, and I'd like to address a question that was sent in, which is how to maintain a sense of balance in a fast-paced world, especially if you have family priorities, etc. So the key word here is balance, and that the body itself, the first understanding is that the body itself is based on balance, a balance of yin-yo, or that's the Japanese word for yin-yang. It's that Chinese symbol that has black on one side and white on the other, with the opposite color dots on within the main or primary colors. And it's basically a diagram of life. That there's essentially structure. The white would indicate structure or form, and the left would indicate flow or chaos. So we've essentially got an order and chaos juxtaposition, but within each there is also the opposite. So no matter how chaotic or how flowing something is, there must be some structure to it. Even if it's hard to find, there's some degree of structure there. Similarly within the tightest structure, there is some degree of flow. For the human body is important, and the mind is important to rest right in the center of that diagram between flow and structure. That really is what occurs as one awakens. The mind stops jumping, stops believing in one or the other, and rests right in between. I describe this as the nexus point. The nexus point between infinite circles. Many who are walking the spiritual path tend to favor the flow or chaotic aspect and maybe don't much appreciate structure. But this will cause dysfunction and disharmony in one's life. If we look at the human body, it's a perfect example of balance. For example, blood, the flow of blood. It is useless unless there's a channel through which directs that energy, the energy and nutrients in the blood. The channel is the structure, that is the vascular structure. We have the muscles which allow us to move, but were it not for the bones, we'd simply be a lump of flesh. The muscles have flow. The bones provide structure. Even within the bones, there's the marrow, which is flow. It is what creates the blood that flows through the veins. Within the bones, within the yang, that would be the white, there is the yin, which is the marrow, which creates the blood. So the first step is to start balancing one's life, start having appreciation for functional or useful structures. When structures get too tight, they become suppressive or tyrannical. When chaos gets too much, then our life has no direction and energy is wasted. Neither of these opposites are where we want to be, right in the very center. So in your life you start creating, if you're lacking structure, you start creating useful structures. Start creating aims and goals and build useful structures that help you along the path, that support your path, that support that flow. We tend to think of the awakening process or spirituality as an abstract thing. And I think that is a misunderstanding. It's a mistake. And that is a projection of the mind. The reality is that it is a biological process that is occurring. The body itself is what is awakening. And so having a supportive cycles that allow the body to be as healthy as possible through our daily life, since we would like to, as we describe, find a sense of balance in the high-paced world, which is our daily life. It's important to have certain healthy biorhythms, and the more that our body is in alignment with the Earth's biorhythms, the stronger it's likely to be, at least relative to how it would be if it were out of sync with the Earth's biorhythms. And so we want the body to be very relaxed but strong, flexible. In order for that to happen, we need a good sleep structure, a biorhythm. Basic rule is get up before sunup, get up before sunrise. If you follow that every day, your body will naturally start to go to sleep when the time is right. Artificial lights tend to screw this up. Using the computer at night tends to screw this up, where it throws off the sleep cycle, keeps our brain awake longer than it should be, so it doesn't release the chemicals that would normally send us to sleep. So it's very wise to turn off artificial lights and turn off the computer screens earlier, or at least limit the intense, I think it's a blue light that comes out of the computers. That's really hard on the brain. As far as sleep goes, it wakes it up. There are no night owls in nature for human beings. People tend to say, well, I'm a night person. That is only the case if one has gotten into the habit of an unnatural biorhythm due to artificial light. You spend your time out camping without artificial light, quite naturally you'll get sleepy earlier. You'll think it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night when you look at the clock and it's 8 o'clock when you go to sleep. And you'll quite naturally, after a period of days, start to wake up before sunrise. That continues for about a week, and it becomes totally your natural rhythm. And then you suddenly find you have so much more energy. You sleep a lot better, and you have so much more energy, so much more clarity. And that gives you more energy and clarity to deal with, quote unquote, the stresses of daily life. Another thing would be to get our digestive rhythm correct. Fasting is a tradition, an old tradition, that is not without merit. In fact, it has great merit. In Aboriginal times, quite naturally, every day is a fast. What I mean by that is, you get up, because of the way that nature works, because of the hunting cycle, the prime times for hunting and for gathering are about an hour before sunrise to a few hours after sunrise. Same thing, sunset. An hour or so before, hour and a half before sunset. Hour, 2 hours after sunset. For human beings, we really can't hunt after dark because our eyes aren't that good, so we basically have the time before sunset and a little bit until it gets dark and if we can't see anymore. So it limits when we have to be out and about hunting, gathering, and that sort of thing. In the middle of the day, it's hot, animals are resting. It's also very visible, so they want to be camouflaged. So they're usually not walking around, they're usually resting. Most animals are out gathering their food. There's a shift between night and day creatures at dawn and dusk, where they're both up and about. So that's the maximum time for hunting. Which means that that's when humans would naturally be out and about doing their hunting and gathering. So you can't cook your food and eat before sunrise. You're going to do it after you get back from your morning adventure. So say you get back around 9 and you cook your breakfast and eat it. You might eat 9:30 or 10. You probably do not eat lunch. And then again, you cook a supper that would be, 4 or 5 in the evening. depending on what time the sunset is, but you know, a couple hours before sunset, so that your food is digested and you're ready to get out and about for the hunting. You don't want to be bloated up and full of food while you're out and about hunting. So you're going to maybe you, depending on sunset, what time that is, it's going to be a few hours before, so it might be as early as 3 o'clock. But essentially you're eating a few meals, 2 meals, that are very close together, or even 1 meal in a day. That's a possibility as well, depending on the degree of fat in the diet. Aboriginal people tend to have a lot of fat in their diet. And so what happens is there's a long fast between the meals. It's going to be 15, even as much as 17, 18 hours. Or possibly more if they're just doing 1 meal in a day. And at this time, the weaker cells in the body will break down and be replaced by healthy cells. So it will constantly keep the body in a peak, at a cellular level, in a peak condition. It'll revitalize the organs, and it's extremely healthy. So in my day life, you can find this, don't remember the doctor's name, but you can look up intermittent fasting. That is something that has become rather popular these days. And I find that fits very well with what happens when you spend time out in survival situations naturally, where you have to hunt and gather. And you don't have stores of food, and you don't have a refrigerator, and you don't have artificial light. But intermittent fasting, the basic rule is if your window of caloric consumption, and this includes anything other than water, so even teas would stimulate the liver for the digestive process, so that doesn't count. But anything that stimulates the digestive process should be consumed within a 9-hour window. So if you ate say at 9 o'clock in the morning, your last meal would be 5 or 6 in the evening to get the maximum benefit. Less than 9 hours, you don't get any extra benefit, but you get peak benefit if that window of consumption is within a 9-hour period during the day. And you get some benefit up to as much as a 12-hour window. So you have at least a 12-hour fast, and for maximum a 15-hour fast between meals. So that's the food rhythm. Start reducing the degrees of sugar and carbohydrates. Just minimize them. In a survival situation, a natural situation, those things tend to be much, much less, unless they're liquid form, in which case usually it's oddly enough, the people in the Amazon, their main caloric intake is a kind of beer they make, or alcohol that they make. It's not a high content alcohol, it's probably like a beer, but well, I mean, it's a live culture, but it works surprisingly well from them. They're very healthy. It was counterintuitive to me, but basically they've got the few plants that they harvest and a few wild edible leaves that they harvest. Most things are toxic to human consumption in the Amazon forest as far as flora goes, but then they have a fairly good meat, or fairly high meat consumption. Just be aware that each body style is going to, depending on the torso length, is going to digest vegetable matter differently. So if you have a very long torso, it means you have very long intestinal tract, which is going to make it much easier to digest plant matter. So such individuals are much more, will be much better inclined towards high vegetative matter, or even a vegetarian diet in general. I mean, there may be some exceptions to this, but you usually find this. Asians, for example, will have shorter legs, very long torsos. People from India, that sort of thing. Native Americans typically have a shorter torso and longer legs, especially on the East Coast or the mid Americas. But it can vary. So you might just experiment with this to find your optimum diet so that the body functions best and in a most healthy way. Set aside food ideology. It's like, if your cat needs to eat meat, would you feed it salad? That would just be cruel. It's the same with the human body. Think of this as your pet. Love it and feed it as it does well. Feed it what it does well on. Set aside food ideology. One thing I can say with pretty good certainty sugar is not a good idea. Limit that as much as possible. Some people, vegetarian diet may be what works very, very well. So, as it is for each individual. Some would say it's cruel to kill animals. I think that all living beings feel, and no one really wants to die. It is a part of life and death. The solution is not to kill, because we do have to eat. At least at this point, according to our current technology, the solution might be a more humane way of killing, and certainly less population. We may be just simply overpopulated. So there's that to consider if we're working on concern for animals suffering and concern for the earth. These are issues we've not addressed really. Overpopulation doesn't seem to be something that people really want to talk about, and it will cause, well, it is actually probably causing most of the troubles we are currently having now. So we've got the biorhythm of sleep, and we have the biorhythm of diet. Then we need a healthy period of work time, having breaks every hour or 45 minutes or so, just to refresh the mind, so that we don't work the brain. You'll get more creativity, more capacity to work efficiently if you give little breaks here and there, so that the brain has a chance. If you're not sleeping well at night, you are greatly limiting your capacity to think clearly, for creativity, and to learn, because your brain really does its adjusting. It's changing. It's learning while sleeping. And then the next thing would be to deal with our attitude towards stress. Stress in itself is not a problem. In fact, it's essential to a certain degree, just like the yin-yang symbol. Some of order and chaos is both necessary. So gravity is a kind of stress. It provides pressure on the body, and were it not for that pressure, we would lose our bone structure. In fact, astronauts that go into space and they test the urine, just one day in space, the heavy concentrations of minerals, calcium and that sort of thing in the urine, because their bodies automatically starts breaking down that which it doesn't believe it needs. In space, there's no gravity. We don't need our bones. And so the body starts to break down. The stress of gravity is essential. If you want to build muscle mass, you need some weight to build that muscle mass. Stress can be a very good thing, depending on our attitude towards it. A lot of times our greatest stress is our attitude towards stress. So start changing the attitude. Start noticing how the challenges are good things, within a limit. Again, balance is important, right in the center of that diagram. Most of our issues with stress are attitudinal. Now, living in Japan, I had a close friend. This commonly happens in Japan, or it happens often, more often there than here anyway, where a company will overwork employees. One of a good friend of mine almost died due to overwork. He was good at his job, and he was a banker, and they worked him to the bone. He did financial calculations and that sort of thing, and he spent about a month in the hospital because he almost died. That's where the gravity's gotten too heavy. So, managing that sort of the workload will be very, very important. If we want our families to be in alignment with the awakening process, with these rhythms, if we only have our sleep schedule right, if only we have our diet working well, if only we have our diet biorhythm working well, but our family is just continuing the other way, kind of randomly or whatnot, there's going to be stress there. There's unnecessary disharmony. So if we're parents, we can get our children to wake up before sunrise. Get our children to have a diet that an eating rhythm that is, that 9 hours or less window. There's no exceptions to that window. You don't sleep in on Saturday or Sunday. You get up at the same time every day of the week. There is no exceptions to it. That throws off the biorhythm. It's unhelpful to sleep in like that. If you don't like intermittent fasting or that fasting every day, you could do it 1 day a week, like the Jewish used to do. That's a concoction of a farming society to kind of simulate a similar effect. It's not exactly natural, but it's better than not fasting, certainly. Or once a month, maybe you fast for 3 days. And 72 hours, if you fast for 72 hours, it's shown that about 30% of the cells of the body die off. These are the weaker cells, things, diseased cells and that sort of thing. And then when we start eating it, it's replaced by fresh cell matter. And that is very, very healthy because it's strengthening your body. Problem with that is if we have very slow metabolisms or we have a tendency to get fat easily, your body will think it's starving and will start to blow up. So personally, I think the intermittent fasting is generally the best way to go as far as biorhythm goes. I hope that helps and answers your questions. If you have any other questions, there's a whole bunch more to this, but really it's getting our daily life biorhythm right, correcting our attitude towards challenges, and then the body will be in its peak health condition. At least, it doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but it will be much better off. You will feel better relative to how you would otherwise feel. And that is moving us forward in the right direction. Thank you so much. If you like these videos and you would like to donate and support this channel, there's a link below. It's so much appreciated. It'd be very, very helpful. And I forgot to mention about meditation. Meditation is very, very helpful to set your mind, to clear your mind and set the right atmosphere. When you wake up in the morning, I highly recommend 10 minutes of meditation. Highly recommended. Same thing before you go to sleep at night, 10 minutes of meditation. I mean, it can be longer or shorter, but those will prime your day and prime your sleep. That's how you get the cycle really going well. If you have trouble waking up or having clarity for the meditation, cold showers or even very hot showers. I used to do this. I used to use cold showers when I was in Japan, and I was having trouble with waking up. I would take a cold shower. If cold showers are out of the question, you could just take cold water and splash it on your face a few times. I take it over my whole head and face, and that seems to do the trick pretty well too. Best is cold showers. So that can certainly help. So anyway, all these are great tools, and I recommend you play with them. And if you'd like to learn a basic meditation, I have a very powerful one on my website at www.richardhaight.net/meditations/meditation. You can go to my website and you'll see the link there at the top. And click there, and there's the introductory lesson, and you can just practice that. It's a very basic meditation that is nothing but basic. In that, if you practice that, it will take you a long ways, and it's extremely powerful. But anybody can do it. Children can do this meditation, whereas they oftentimes cannot do others because it's so natural. Thank you. Bye bye.